Eric Bieniemy leaving Kansas City to become the offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders has many people confused. And I get your confusion. Why would Eric Bieniemy leave an organization that he just won 2 Super Bowls with, leave the best quarterback in the NFL, along with one of the best head coaches in the league in Andy Reid, and go to one of the worst ran franchises, not just in the NFL, but in sports? And I get all those things, but this is not a bad situation for Eric Bieniemy. As a matter of fact, this isn't a bad situation at all. This is a really fantastic opportunity for Eric Bieniemy. Washington has a pretty talented roster. You have a really good group of wide receivers. You guys already know what Scary Terry does. You got Curtis Samuel. Jahan Dotson had a really good rookie season when he was able to stay on the field. You got Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson at running back. There is talent for Eric Bieniemy to work with. Your only question is, what are you going to do at quarterback? Are they going to roll with Sam Howell? There was a report earlier at the start of this offseason that the plan was to roll with Sam Howell as QB1. Sam Howell, he had a pretty okay game against Dallas. It wasn't bad, it wasn't great, but it was solid. Sam Howell is a really talented quarterback. He has all of the physical tools to be a really productive starter in this league. Don't forget, Sam Howell, prior to his final season at UNC, he was projected to be one of the first quarterbacks coming off the board, along with Spencer Rattler. But Spencer Rattler and him, their seasons that year didn't go as planned. Spencer Rattler got benched, and Sam Howell was held back by just not having a great team around him at North Carolina. But when he was coming out of high school, he was a top 100 player. He is arguably the best quarterback in UNC football history. He kind of helped change the perception of North Carolina. Before Sam Howell got there, people just viewed North Carolina as a basketball school. And then when Sam Howell arrived, just from his freshman year, he helped change North Carolina from being perceived as just a basketball school to being viewed as somewhat of a respectable football school. I think Sam Howell with Eric Bieniemy, they could work together. They could cook. Now, if you want to go out there and you want to get you a Derek Carr or a Jimmy Garoppolo, that could work also. But I think Sam Howell has more upside than Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo. And Eric Bieniemy, he's a fantastic offensive coordinator. And I think for Sam Howell, him being able to work with Eric Bieniemy is going to be able to help him greatly in his development. And you look at the rest of this division, Philadelphia, Dallas, the New York Giants, all these teams are pretty talented. The New York Giants, they're not as talented as Washington, in my opinion, or Dallas, but they're going to end up improving. And Brian Daboll, we saw the job that he did in year 1. He's probably going to do an even better job in year 2 with a more improved roster. But Washington, I think, with a few improvements on the offensive line, they could have one of the more underrated offenses, at least from a talent standpoint, in the NFL. People are making it seem like Eric Bieniemy is going to Washington and he's completely being set up to fail. Listen, it's upsetting that Eric Bieniemy has to go through all of this to become an NFL head coach, but you got to understand something. Eric Bieniemy, there are some reports out there that he doesn't interview well. We already know he has a little bit of some history off the field. And plus, that also is taken into account when it comes to deciding who ends up getting these head coaching jobs. A guy like DeMeco Ryans or Robert Saleh, who doesn't have the kind of off-the-field incidents like Eric Bieniemy does, they're going to have a little bit of an easier time getting those head coaching jobs than Eric Bieniemy. Plus, you got to take into the account that some people don't know just how much of influence he had on Kansas City's offense and their play calling. Now, Eric Bieniemy, I don't have any questions about him as a play caller, although we don't know just how much he was responsible for the play calling in Kansas City. We don't know how much of the plays Andy Reid called and how much Eric Bieniemy contributed to the play calling. But there was a report out there that Eric Bieniemy found something that was eventually used to help Kansas City win the Super Bowl against Philadelphia. So you know those two wide open red zone touchdowns that Kansas City had to Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney, the motion plays that they used to score those touchdowns. So apparently Eric Bieniemy was able to find out that those two plays the Philadelphia Eagles struggled against when they played the Jacksonville Jaguars. He brought that to the staff's attention. I believe that Chad Henne said this in an article that he did with The Athletic, that Eric Bieniemy helped bring that to the staff's attention, and eventually they game planned around it, and eventually it was used against Philadelphia to help them win the Super Bowl. So Eric Bieniemy, this guy has a fantastic football mind. He is a great play caller, in my opinion. He's been around Andy Reid. Doug Peterson was successful coming from this Andy Reid coaching tree. Matt Nagy, he wasn't all that great. But I think Eric Bieniemy, I don't question his football mind. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, they always have high things to say, or they always hold him in high regard when it comes to his football mind. Now, the thing is with Eric Bieniemy is his ability to get along with people. Now, some people have reportedly said that Eric Bieniemy kind of has a tendency to get into some arguments with his players. So, prime example was LaShawn McCoy when he called out Eric Bieniemy for, a couple of arguments that he had with players during his time there. Some people feel it was just LaShawn McCoy being a little salty, but also Patrick Mahomes and Eric Bieniemy exchanged some words recently during the past regular season. And they also had some words during the halftime of the AFC Championship game when they were playing the Cincinnati Bengals the year that the Bengals lost to the Rams in the Super Bowl. So Eric Bieniemy, he's going to Washington to prove himself. And if Eric Bieniemy ends up being the coach that we all believe him to be, or most of us believe him to be, Washington could potentially end up being Super Bowl contenders. And that may sound a little bit crazy and ludicrous to say, but Washington last year, honestly, was 2 or 3 games away from being the playoff team. And most of those games that they lost were due to the fact that they didn't have all that great quarterback play. And despite not receiving good quarterback play, there were still a handful of games that they still had the opportunity to win. Ron Rivera, I have a lot of questions about him as a head coach. I don't think he's all that good. But at the same time, the fact that he was able to get rid of the previous OC, Scott Turner, and bring in a guy like Eric Bieniemy who's going to be able to innovate the offense, I think that's a sign that Ron Rivera is knowing what it takes now to build a championship team. He's kind of starting to shift his philosophy. And maybe Ron Rivera thought he was going to have a little bit more time, so maybe he was thinking that Scott Turner would end up improving over the next couple of years. But now with the team about to be sold to new ownership, Ron Rivera now has to have a certain amount of urgency. Because when the new owners come in there, they most likely going to want to bring in their own guy. And unless Ron Rivera is able to have some success, he has to be able to win. And getting a guy like Eric Bieniemy, some people will consider this high risk, high reward. I kind of think it's low risk because I don't really have any questions about Eric Bieniemy as a play caller. It's not like he never called plays in Kansas City. He has called plays. It's just that he hasn't fully called plays for like the whole entire season or for like a whole entire game or something like that. I don't really know how they divvy up or decided the play calling responsibilities, but now in Washington, we know that he's going to have full control of the offense and that whatever success the Commanders have on offense is mainly going to be due to his play calling.